Refresh your screen.
Yeah. Okay, I see it. We see it.
Okay, cool.
We see it now.
You guys ready?
No. Hold on. We'll go up to the news there. Okay, sorry. I've been trying to hear you and everything else. Stay here, but yeah. Okay. We're at 40 seconds. We don't know if we have any levels for you right now. So
Well, here's the levels, but 40 seconds? Okay.
30 now.
30 seconds.
25.
25 seconds.
20.
Live from Vancouver. So you're going to want to slide in the shot here. A little more. You and your Canadian flag.
Okay, 10 seconds.
10 seconds.
You can hit the bell.
The following radio program has been approved for broadcast by the Federal Communications Commission and is in compliance with all community standards.
This is Mike Wallace. You're listening to Harrison.
Live from Hollywood, it's Harrison. Smart starts now. GoHarrison.com.
What's new about Tiger Woods?
Michael Jackson. Elvis Presley.
O.J. Simpson. Abandoned babies. Order
Harrison. Talk show. Random, political, outrageous, philosophical, analytical, passionate, hidden sunsets, roadkill cooking tips, open-minded, swordsman, bent, resolute, chocolate, bushwhacker, belt buckles, investigative, companion. Call in. Piercing the cloud of mainstream entertainment. Live from Los Angeles, Harrison.
And it is 2 minutes past the hour. Harrison with you, your new best friend. Welcome and happy Monday to you. I am coming to you right now live from Vancouver, British Columbia, also known as Canada, to those of us who are in America. And we say, where's Canada? And we point some direction into the sky. This is North America. One of the things we forget here in the United States, and I'm not here in the United States, I'm in Canada, about to light up a Cuban cigar. It's legal here. We'll get into that in just a moment. But we sort of forget that North America does include Canada. So what happens in the U.S. often happens in Canada as well. But we're going to have a lot of fun this hour because I am right now sitting next to, as you look at the live video stream at GoHarrison.com, GoHarrison.com. You'll see us live in Vancouver. And I'm going to talk to a guy, and you know, I love bringing on the Go Harrison show people who single-handedly save the residents of Earth. It always freaks them out. But I like to find people that you normally wouldn't have access to. And I like to take you to places that you may not normally have access to. And before I introduce the guest, I just want to tell you where I've been for the last week. I was up in Alaska, or down in Alaska from here, or sideways to Alaska from here, over to Alaska from here, and looking at the Marjorie Glacier and other things and watching them melting, or calving as they're politely called, which is an exciting action sport where chunks of the glacier slide off and go splash into the ocean, and it's all very fun and it makes for great photographs, but this is what they look like as they melt and fall apart and diminish. And one of the things about an iceberg as it melts or calves and gets smaller is the whiteness of it reflects the sun's light back into the heavens, and that keeps the temperature cool. Well, as it melts and gets smaller, there's less white to reflect the sun's light back into the sky. And also the pool of blue water, deep blue water that the iceberg is sitting in, gets larger and larger. And as you know, dark surfaces attract sunlight and tend to heat it up. So the more blue, the hotter it gets, the faster the thing melts, the less white there is to reflect the sun's light back. And this is all part of climate change, global warming, call it what you will, but the icebergs are going bye-bye. And I think last year I went live from Switzerland and was standing where there used to be glaciers, and it's now nothing but just rock that you can climb on. Ski resorts permanently closed. Now, while we may not have the kind of evidence that the commercial corporate media would, cover if they took some of their budget from the Kardashian coverage that we also vitally need in order to operate and cooperate as informed citizenry under Thomas Jefferson's dried-up orgasm here, this experiment that's turning into a Romney-esque joy from hell. But one of the things that we get to do is examine how stuff works and why it works that way. So without further ado, let me introduce to you a man named Gil, and we're just going to leave it at that. And he's a guy here in Vancouver, Canada. Again, this is where we are right now. You can see live video at goharrison.com. Gil is the guy who once worked as a federal guy. And let me just welcome you first, just so you're not sitting here staring at me giving lofty encomiums.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here. It's interesting. I've never had to listen to an encomium before.
And also, using our wonderful technology and being able to come live to you from Vancouver without spending 10 or 15 grand on AT&T and ISDN lines. I mean, really, it's amazing. And the Residence Inn here in the West End of Vancouver.
Residence Inn.
Yeah. Marriott, they've been very kind. They love what we do here, so they're helping us out, and we're in a room here overlooking the city and the harbor and all the rest of it. But Gil was one of the guys who helped put through gay marriage in Canada. This is no small feat. Now, Prop 8 is a civil rights issue that we all deal with throughout California. It's become a national spectacle, a national argument. We had Rob Reiner, the director, on just a few weeks ago, and we were talking about this battle. People have put millions into it, and we don't seem to find the right kind of argument. Yes, you can't have, in the California Constitution, two people allowed, or two separate groups of people who are the same people having different rights. So that's how we were able to have Prop 8 reversed, and then, of course, it went to a different court, and now it's illegal to be married. Even if you were married, you stay married. But, Gil, let's tell your story. Canada is part of the Commonwealth. You're loosely connected still with Great Britain. We are still loosely connected. If, we decide to lift a leg and spray our Tomcat spray on a tree, Great Britain is right there with fighter jets. It happens. Bretton Woods, the gold standard, all of it is inextricably intertwined. But let's talk for a minute about once upon a time in Canada, like 15 years ago, you couldn't get married, and then poof, you can, but it wasn't because somebody wished it to be so, high up.
No, and I mean, what happened was, 1991, moved out here with my partner, and I applied for spousal relocation, which is a standard thing within businesses, that if your spouse moves one place, then you go with them, you get a transfer, and they find you a job in the other place. So, fine. I applied for that, and they came back and said, well, but the problem with that is you're two guys, so you can't do that. And so we appealed the decision. And the trick is just using the tools that are at hand, and ultimately, 3 years later, after having gone up and down and up and down, it got before the deputy minister at the time, and she looked at this thing and she said, why is this here? Fix it, and fix it now. Because if my reaction was, well, if my spouse had been a female, there would be no question where I would live or where we would live. So that was the first pebble, I like to think of it, that started the whole torrent, because in the beginning, it was just the definition of spouse in all of the collective agreements in Canada read that a spouse was somebody of the opposite sex, regardless of whether it was common law or married. Okay? And so what they did in 1991 or 1993, when it actually finally came through, was that they read into the definition of spouse that a spouse was could be a person of either gender. So you could have, but you had to have common law status, meaning that you had to have lived together for at least 2 years. and, be recognized in the community as a couple, yada, 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 right? And that was the beginning. And from there, the challenges kept on going and going and going. You don't start off doing something thinking, I am going to, put on my super tight suit and just, and my cape and fly over Gotham City and correct all wrongs. I mean, you think like...
You haven't been on Hollywood Boulevard lately, right around Highland.
No, I can't say as I have. I've been here at Halloween. It's sort of probably similar. Ultimately, it was just that decision that and you go for it. And we both decided, well, why should we not have this right? So we got the right, and that was fine. But with rights become responsibilities and all of those things. So the changing of the thing in Canada took a decade at least. My partner who of that time was killed 2 years after that in a car accident. So it was one of those things, and then it took another 7 years after that to get the settlement from the Canada Pension Plan, and from which I now receive widower's benefit.
So I'm going to jump in for a second. If you're just joining us right now, Harrison with you. You are listening to Go Harrison on KPFK 90.7 FM in Los Angeles, 98.7 FM in Santa Barbara, 93.7 in San Diego, 99.5 in Central California, as well as live streaming at goharrison.com and PRN. And what we're doing right now from Vancouver, live from Vancouver, is talking the international perspective. We're going to talk a little about healthcare. We're going to talk a little bit about the American media and how that looks when you're not sitting in the middle of America, and really why anybody anywhere in the world should even know what a Kardashian is. Seriously. I was on this ship, and we were in Alaska talking to people from Australia, and they knew what a Kardashian was. Why should they, on the other side of Earth, have any clue except that our media is so saturated with nothingness that we're so wildly underinformed, except for things like that and Tom Cruise's, turgid tumescing proboscis and all the rest of it, and is it or isn't it? And all of that is ultimately irrelevant with the larger issues. We're talking to Gil. Gil is the guy who pretty much put through what we call gay marriage in Canada. Started the first pebble, which turned into a boulder, and now it's a reality. And as we struggle with this in the United States, there is hope because you actually helped make this thing happen, Gil.
Well, I think the important thing that the decision that ultimately was made on marriage in Canada, which was 2001, 2002, that decision was made based on English common law, and what we've done in Canada in looking at all of these issues is we've not sought special treatment. So we've not said we're special under the law, so we should be treated specially. It's that we are equal under the law, so we should be treated equally. And in the situation with ultimately with the issuance of marriage licenses, the government was hoist on its own petard in that. In Canada, the provinces regulate the issuance of licenses and the Marriage Act. The federal government issues has the wider overall thing, so it's a split responsibility. And so what happened is in Ontario, these guys went to the city of Toronto seeking a marriage license, and the city said, "No way, you're two guys, right?" So they went out and they went back to their respective churches, and I don't know if you have bans of marriage in the United States where they get read in each other's churches. It's an old British custom. It happens in Canada. It's now been done away with. And it happened, I believe, in parts of the States, in certain jurisdictions in the States. Before you get married, three Sundays before you get married, the minister in the church must read saying, so-and-so and so-and-so is getting married, and if anybody knows any just reason why they shouldn't be married, and if nobody posts any just reasons, after 3 weeks, you are entitled to get married. And in Ontario, they had never changed that law. And so their respective ministers in these guys' two congregations read the bans of marriage. And 3 weeks later, he married them, and then they went down to register their license, and the guy says, "You can't do that." And the city said, and then they went to the federal court, and the federal court said, "Yes, they can, because
nobody objected.
The Bans of Marriage Act does not define spouse." So it was, just that they must be read in the church of each each person, kind of thing. So there was no definition of male female, and so ultimately, the federal court said no, you can't. You can't, just because you forgot to do it doesn't mean that it's illegal, kind of thing. So they allowed it, and the Canadian decision on marriage is based in English common law. It is not based in legislation of the government of Canada, which means that to change it, you would require a constitutional convention, which basically ain't going to happen.
So this begs another question, because the United States, once upon a time, being, a colony of Great Britain, much as Canada was until, 100-something years ago, we really follow the same formula. I would imagine if this really came out, and if you're listening right now, we're talking to Gil, a former federal official here in Canada. He's the guy who released the logjam and helped create what is commonly gay marriage. As you know, you can have that. Well, hell, you can do it in Spain. You can do it everywhere, except in the U.S. right now. The advanced country. We like to say that anyway. And one of the things that he did was make it possible. So he's one of the guys, one of the principals here. And we're talking about this notion of English common law and how Canada is subject to it, but so is the United States. Now, let's really look at that. Does that mean that what happens in Canada also happens in the United States?
It can have an effect. So that if you're looking for precedent in a decision, you can cite Canadian references in it, and I would suspect that for the original 13 colonies, at least, that all of them had bans of marriage as part of the process for because the reason for doing bans of marriage was to make it public, so that if anybody was going to be a bigamist, you announced it in church, and that,
or you go to Utah.
Yeah, well, that was a given, though. It was, you got 2 extra for crossing the line, don't you? So they got, everybody knew what was going on, and so anyway, that could be quoted and cited in the case, and that would depend on what the various states did. I know that New York State, when they recognized gay marriage, they also recognized any marriages that were done in Canada as well. And of course, America and Canada are signatories of an agreement that they recognize each other's marriages. So technically, the federal government of the United States technically recognizes, because of that treaty, any gay marriage that was done in Canada.
So if I were to get a boyfriend here in Canada, the west end of Vancouver, where we're sitting right now, which from the balcony, as I look out, I do detect some of TW that way, those people, TPP. Yes, and so let's say I grabbed a nice Canadian with good table manners and got married and went back to the United States. The United States would technically have to honor that at a federal level. And it's different at a federal level. At a state level, where you have states like Connecticut and others that allow marriage, you don't get the tax break at the federal level. But this would really change everything.
Well, I mean, I don't know that it's been tested, and that's the other part of it. You need to push the envelope. Nothing happens if you don't push the envelope. And that's the way, ultimately, is that you take existing law and existing precedent and you work with that. The only woman Prime Minister of Canada, who was also a member of Parliament for this riding here, and was a very short term, but she was quoted when people said to her, well, pass gay marriage. She said, you don't want legislation, you want a constitutional decision, because legislation can be changed by another government, new piece of legislation, wipe it out, Obamacare, Romneycare, like that thing. But a constitutional change is nigh on impossible in both Canada and the United States. So it's not going to happen. And now, 10 years later almost, no, it's the biggest non-issue in Canada. Even for most of the evangelical right, it's just not an issue.
Well, we're going to talk in just a moment. We're going to pause live from Vancouver, Canada. We're going to talk a little bit about the evangelical right, what it looks like in North America, here in Vancouver, British Columbia, looking south to the United States, our religious fever, our Mitt Romneys, our Obamas, Obamacare, all the rest of it. What does it look like if you're on a diet of American media versus